I never realized the poisonous touch of Fox News would reach north across the border and influence people up here, particularly people that I love. And to see this wild propaganda being spread in the disguise of news is disheartening and tears people apart from each other. And I think this is probably by design. I lose respect for anybody that thinks Tucker Carlson is good or Joe Manchin is good. The shock of hearing it from somebody you care about is distressing and makes me understand the splits in the American population, because the evil that is capable of dividing families, it's because of the outrageousness of the big lie and the absolute insanity that permeates the airwaves in America, has become nothing but a purveyor of lies and misinformation designed to rile up people for ratings, designed to, I don't know what. I'm so disgusted by what is culturally acceptable, where nobody believes anything because the news media has been corrupt ever since Bill Clinton's time, before then even, but he put it on steroids. He did things that no Republican would have dared to do that were so right-wing and so divisive, and set the stage for so much of the crap that's going on today. And when I hear idiots in the mainstream news say Democrats need to be more centrist, they need to be more right-wing, in other words. I can't believe that there's a buzz going about Hillary Clinton making a return engagement in 2024.
Can't wait for us to have some theoretical debate about some better idea that will never, ever come to pass.
As if having the two least popular candidates in history running against each other, again, a rematch, so to speak, is leaving so many people disillusioned, and so many people who had hope that when the Trump era ended, the insanity would end. But the insanity has gone on so long, much of it under the radar. If you're feeling like reading some news that doesn't get covered a whole lot, go on over to Project Censored. Project Censored has listed the 25 top censored stories, and these are either stories that have been downplayed or hidden by the mainstream media for various reasons, probably to do with their advertising revenue. But I thought I'd go through some of these and read a little bit, in case anybody cares. The number 5 story: microplastics and toxic chemicals increasingly prevalent in world's oceans. What a surprise that is. And according to a July 2020 study published in the scholarly journal Environmental Science and Technology, PFAS, a family of potentially harmful chemicals used in a range of products including carpets, furniture, food packaging, and non-stick coatings have now been found in the Arctic Ocean. Yeah, how'd they get there? Must have been a lot of people up there using these products, right? Because they wouldn't just all end up in the Arctic. Anyway, the discovery worries scientists because it means that PFAS can reach any body of water anywhere in the world, and such chemicals are likely present in our water supply. Meanwhile, researchers at the QUEX Institute, a partnership between the University of Exeter and the University of Queensland, have found microplastics in crabs, oysters, prawns, squid, sardines sold as seafood. Findings also first published in Environmental Science and Technology, covered by Medical News Today in August 2020, suggests that microplastics, small pieces of plastic less than 5 millimeters in length, about the size of a sesame seed, it's still pretty big, have invaded the food chain to a greater extent than previously realized. And reaching the spot of number 4 on the most censored stories, climate detonations have colonized the atmosphere. Why not? In April 2021, President Joe Biden's Leaders Summit on Climate brought together more than 40 national leaders to address global carbon emissions. Biden outlined his administration's goal to reduce U.S. carbon emissions by 50 to 52% of the nation's 2005 levels by 2030. And Vice President Kamala Harris, who introduced Biden, told summit attendees, as a global community, it is imperative that we act quickly and together to confront this crisis. The President's Summit was widely reported by corporate news, including CNN, and the coverage frequently included the Vice President's call for global responsibility. As Sarah Lazar reported for In These Times, an analysis published in the September issue of the Lancet Planetary Health shines new light on the outsized role of the United States, European Union, and the global North in creating a climate crisis, while felt everywhere, is disproportionately harming the global South. The Lancet study, conducted by Jason Hickel, an economic anthropologist, found that the world's richest and most industrialized nations, including the United States, Canada, members of the European Union, Israel, Australia, New Zealand, and Japan, are responsible for 92% of emissions. 92%. So, as far as this being a global problem that has to be tackled globally, perhaps we should look in our own backyards first. Outlets such as USA Today, The Washington Post, and Fox News have yet to run a single story on the wildcat strikes sweeping the nation. Overall, the establishment media's scant coverage has rendered invisible the remarkable work of working-class black and brown activists who are largely responsible for this wave of protests. The sole exception to the corporate media's blackout on the year-long strike wave occurred during a brief period in August 2020 when Vox, The New Yorker, The New York Times, The Washington Post, and CNN all suddenly decided to cover wildcat strikes, but only of one particular kind. Specifically, those involving highly paid athletes on pro basketball and baseball teams. The players walked out against the terms of their contract to protest the shooting of Jacob Blake by Wisconsin police, and the corporate media coverage of U.S. strikes swiftly ended once the players returned later that same week. Thank God for journalism. And that brings us to the second most censored story from 2021. And that is journalists investigating financial crimes threatened by global elites. In November 2020, the Foreign Policy Center released Unsafe for Scrutiny, a report about the threats faced by journalists investigating the financial misconduct that lets dirty money flow through the world's most powerful banks. As Spencer Woodman detailed in an article for the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, the report reveals that global elites have been abusing their intimidating legal and financial power by targeting reporters with defamation, lawsuits, cease and desist letters, social media smear campaigns, trolling, verbal harassment, and even occasionally physical violence. Yet, as Woodman underscored, the report concluded that legal threats are chief among the types of harassment facing journalists conducting financial investigations. The harassment faced by investigative journalists looking into financial crimes has a chilling effect on reporting about corruption and ultimately infringes the public's right to know about the money laundering, bribery, theft of public funds, and other illicit acts carried out or facilitated by wealthy banks, government officials, and corporate leaders. Who here is surprised by this story? This is like, in other words, water is wet. And this is one you're not likely to hear on any of the major corporate news outlets because advertisers might get a little bit upset, and nobody spends as much money advertising as Big Pharma, those wondrous people that brought you the number one story, which is prescription drug costs set to become the leading cause of death for elderly Americans. More than 1.1 million seniors in their federal government's Medicare program could die prematurely over the next decade because they will be unable to afford the high prices of their prescription medications, according to a November 2020 study issued by the West Health Policy Center, a nonprofit, nonpartisan policy research group. As Kenny Stansel reported for Common Dreams West Health Projects, that the continuation of current drug pricing trends, cost-related non-adherence will become a leading cause in the U.S. ahead of diabetes, influenza, pneumonia, and kidney disease by 2030. The rising cost of prescription medicine will lead to an estimated 112,000 premature deaths annually due to elderly Americans being unable to afford necessary medications. Patients skip doses, ration prescriptions, or quit treatment altogether. And nowhere in the world are drug prices anywhere near as high as they are in America. Luckily, I live in Canada, so I'm not dealing with ridiculous drug prices. Have been legal reasons why they haven't been allowed to do that. Now, you've heard of ham bone, but have you heard of Tbone and the Tbone side of life? Well, in my continuing effort to cast some sort of a little flashlight or a pen light on small creators, discovered Tbone and liked what he had to say. And thankfully, Sandy also liked what he had to say over at Environmental Coffee House. And Hambone said about Tbone, "Oh, T, he's out of jail." My long-lost brother. So here's a little clip from Tbone, a video he did about Martin Luther King that was very good and deserves a few hundred more views. So here we go. And this is Tbone doing his Tbone thing.
MLK was America's, I would say, first and last true social democrat. But he was so much more than that. He was America's only great social philosopher ever, period. I would say a Rollins and a Jefferson are jokes by comparison. Yeah, really. Think about it. They had no understanding really of great systems, their shortcomings, their real economics, their true politics. MLK did, and he tried to teach us Americans the future we would inhabit it. If violence and hate continue to prevail over nonviolence and love. It wasn't going to be pretty for sure. It was going to be a dystopian, horrific, and surreal. He saw the future with a kind of perfect clarity, we would say. When he said capitalism and war would fail us, for example, wasn't he exactly right?
Can you deal with it when right-wingers go, "Joe Biden's a communist, he's a socialist"? My God, if only these people had a brain. Alas, they have no understanding of anything, and will be propelled by Cold War rhetoric about the dangers of communism and socialism. Just in what way is Joe Biden a socialist or a communist? I laugh, except that I cry because of the insanity in the world, because in what universe could Joe Biden be considered a communist? or even a socialist. Have you got Medicare for all yet? No, no, not even any democratic socialism there. Just the same old, same old.